Sure that everybody's muted, so that way we don't have any feedback or interference going on. Tonight's going to be a more of a vocabulary learning process this evening. We're going to be touching base on a lot of different terminology that a lot of you might not have heard of, and some of you probably have heard of. If you've been to court, you might be able to recognize some of these terms, but we're going to start with a little bit area here dealing with exportation. That's where we leave our citizenship of the corporate status of government that was described through the District of Columbia through the 1871 Act. And the birth certificate actually came into effect in August of 1871 as far as the act itself, the District of Columbia. And that's when they declared in August that all doctors and anybody having kids need to have a record of such information. And so that was actually the beginning start of our all cap name back in the day, so to speak. As we look at the possibilities of what's transpiring today in society, I honestly believe and without any doubt that we are definitely returning back to a republic form of government dealing with constitutional principles instead of democracy and the corporate structure of government. And so we're going to just kind of start off here kind of slow and kind of go into some different terminology. One of the areas that we wanted to touch base on is, being a national, we don't vote, just so you guys know. You can choose to vote, but you're voting for a corporate structure, which will really, kind of take you away from being a national, so to speak, because once you participate in that structure, then you're basically doing away with all the paperwork and anything that you've done previously. And so basically, you have to understand that we can support as many candidates as possible, and we do. And so that's kind of how we look at it. Some other people might disagree with that, but that's okay. I mean, any presumption that the government has is the ability to move you back into a field of commercial status. And so we're going to take a look at today the judicial discretion of trial courts, okay? This is an old book here. It's one of my many books that we have here that deal with constitutional principles. This was printed in 1931. It's a first edition. And so we're going to talk about presumption that discretion rightly exercised. Accompanying every act of a court in the performance of its functions of administrating justice is a presumption that such act has been properly and correctly done. This is but the presumption that attaches to doing any official act. It is an application of the general maxim of law. There is no principle of law better settled that every act of a court of competent jurisdiction shall be presumed to have been rightly done. This rule applies as well to every judgment or decree rendered in the various stages of their proceedings, from the initiation to their completion, as their adjudication that the plaintiff has a cause of action. Now, such a presumption becomes a part of every order or ruling made by a trial court in exercise of a power claimed or conceded to be within the administrative functions. All reasonable presumptions are in favor of regulatory and against error. And if there are any reasonable hypothesis upon which a ruling can be upheld, it must be adopted. Here we have such a hypothesis, which the record does not negative. Before the order denying a new trial can be disturbed, it must be made appear affirmative that the trial court abused discretion in making it. This is but to say that it will never be assumed by the appellate court that an error has been committed. Now that's a lot of words and a lot of verbiage, and it might went right over a lot of people's heads, okay? But this is kind of a synopsis and a breakdown. Courts operate under 12 presumptions. They have different areas of presumptions that they draw you in. The first presumption is that you're first a citizen of the United States Corporation District of Columbia. The second aspect is your all cap name, which is a commercial name. And again, under the Administrative Act of every state, if they do show it defined, it basically states that all letters of the English alphabet only include uppercase letters. There's no distinction between typeface or font that'll be recognized. And so we have to, as nationals, have to be able to understand that we have the burden of showing the abuse of discretion if you're in a court case. Okay, so how do we go ahead and show that abuse? One of the areas that we look at is the terminology, because again, we're looking at setting up our trusts. We're looking at doing all aspects of UCC filings and different things in that nature to protect your all capital name through liens and things of this nature, and taking into consideration all the collateral. Now, when we look at 4 words, okay, these are probably some of the most important 4 words that you'll ever have to ever, hear within a courtroom situation if you're a part of. And this is what I would suggest. Who claims equitable title? Think about that. Who claims the equitable title? Okay. Now, we have to take into consideration, first of all, equity. Okay. Equity is basically ownership, what you have into it, what you have done to maintain that status of your name. So by doing paperwork and taking control over your living man instead of the presumption that you're a dead entity under the federal rules and regulations of the codes, as far as United States codes, UCC, all the areas of CFR, things of this nature. So let's say, for instance, you're in a traffic court and they're trying to fine you, and you ask, well, who claims the equitable title to my name? And of course, nobody hardly ever does anything like this. And this is something that I thought might be interesting for HAMP and some of the other people out there that, if you do get pulled over, this is something that if you decide to go into the actual courtroom, which some do, some people don't, just depending on how much knowledge you have and the ability to stand behind the bar and things of this nature. And the bar is the actual gateway to the commercial structure of the courtroom. So who's actually asking you about the tax or the fine? Okay, is this a taxing agency that's demanding payment for this presumption of the all cap name? So who actually claims equitable title to my labor? Okay, is it the court? Is it the prosecutor? Is it the deputy of the sheriff that pulled you over, gave you the ticket? Again, what if it's a bank foreclosing on you? Who claims equitable title to your property? Okay. These are things that we have to take into consideration, because if they don't answer, silence is basically an admission that they know that they don't own or actually own what they're trying to control. And this is where we, the people, have to stand up and be able to take consideration that not everybody is going to be able to communicate this kind of language. So you got to, practice this stuff. You got to do your research. You got to take the time to be able to move forward in any type of situation. Okay. Because the courts, they assume that you abandoned the equitable control over your name. Now, most governments' claims are based on the assumption that nobody will challenge their authority. But when you ask the right question, a lot of the information that you're going to be requesting collapses the whole structure of the courtroom. So just think about that. Who really owned your property? Do they have documentation proving it? Okay. So if you're in the courtroom and you have equitable title to your name, can you prove that? Do you have equitable title to your property? Can you prove that? If they really had a claim, they'd put it in writing. And so they can't because they actually don't. And so what they're doing is they're just going silent and allowing you to assume that they do have jurisdiction under these principles. Now, when you've made a proper claim and you ask the right questions, most people argue about the facts instead of challenging the ownership. Okay. Equitable title. Think about that. Equitable title. Now, equity is a really important part of your trust because, again, anything that you place into your trust, you're claiming equity within that aspect. So, as we move forward, again, this is going to be kind of a learning experience on different terminologies and different books I'm going to be utilizing tonight. This is the American Dictionary, okay, the Webster Dictionary, 1828. And the reason I like to pull out the Webster Dictionary of 1828 is because it's actually the first really American style dictionary, European style dictionary that put down the meaning of words. Up until that time, everybody had different, belief systems of what a word meant. And just like today, we're baby boomers, myself and my wife, Carla, and we look at it from the standpoint of the terminology that we grew up with is much different than the terminology that people have today. And so when we communicate, they don't understand our definition, and sometimes we don't understand their definition of the words that they're utilizing. My grandmother always used to say, a 10-year area. And this kind of helps with relationships, I do believe, as well. When you stay within a decade, let it be 10 years older than you or 10 years younger than you, you have basically the same ideology that allows you to know the same meaning of words. When you start getting outside that 10-year structure, everything changes. And it affects relationships, it affects court cases, it affects every aspect of your life when you don't know the meaning of what has transpired. And so the first word we're going to look at is attachment. A taking of a person, goods, or estate by a writ or precept in a civil action to secure a debt or demand. Okay. Now, what transfers right now here in our society is we have government institutions that are all administrative, that are taking through the attachment of your all cap name or any other aspect of commercial structure, the ability to control your assets. Okay. And they're doing this through the attachment. The attachment that they utilize is the bonds that they place upon you, the living man, woman, son, or daughter. And so those are things that we have to understand, that an attachment is basically an attack, okay? An attack on your assets, your living structure that God created, not the commercial structure that government created. But sometimes that attack is on the government structure because, again, it creates financial credit debit within the system that we have today through the Securitization Act of 1933. So let's look what attack means. To fall upon with unfriendly words or writing, to begin a controversy with, to attempt to overthrow or bring into dispute by satire or criticism, all under the aspect of opinions and so forth. So when they attack you, they're attacking you through the attachment of your all cap name. Okay. Now, as we move forward within the aspect of putting trust together and you're doing your birth certificates and things of this nature, we have to take into consideration how do we compel government to recognize who we are as men and women, the living, versus the entity, the all cap name through the CESDQ trust that is established. And how do we go ahead and move forward within that aspect? So, what does compel mean? To drive or urge with force, to constrain, to oblige, to necessitate either the physical or the moral force. Okay, so you're compelling something by force. Okay, like have you ever been to a court case and you're trying to get evidence and things of this nature? You're asking, okay, because that's what they're doing through a motion. You're asking. Motions are not what a national would utilize. Okay, we use everything through affidavits and declarations. But on the other side of citizen, you're asking the court to force the other individual to bring forth whatever evidence or pay your fine or whatever the case may be. And so to be able to understand, we have to be able to recognize again equity. Okay. And equity comes in the aspect of compensation. Okay. So to compensate, to give equal value to, recompense, to give equivalent for services or the amount lost or bestowed, to return, to bestow that which makes a good a loss or is estimated as sufficient remuneration. Now, when we are asking for compensation, we're basically bringing in justice for a loss. We're filing a claim in equity. We're not filing a suit in the civil courts. We're actually going to take control of the equity. And that's where we have to be able to protect ourselves within that aspect of what equity is. Because again, each and every one of us have to be able to communicate this new structure that we're going to be moving through. And as compensation is brought forth, it's basically in law, okay, a set off, the payment of a debt by a credit of the equal amount. Think of what I'm saying, credit. Wait a minute, I thought we had money here. No, we don't have money here. We have fiat currencies that is a credit debit system created by the Federal Reserve, created by the 13 families that are in control of many, many areas of financial areas that most of us don't even know their names. And so those are some of the areas that we have to take into consideration. Now, when we look at it from a standpoint of accusation, okay, a complaint, because what we're doing is if anybody's coming after you, they're filing a complaint, okay? Now the question is, was there a grand jury? Was there a warrant? Because most of us don't understand, because when you utilize that term, you're standing under the judicial aspect of the commercial status of government. So when you're in court and somebody says, hey, do you understand what I'm telling you, sir? And you say, yes, you're actually giving away your rights. You're standing under the authority that you have presumed that they have over you, the living man and woman. And again, unless you attack the equity of your name, it's a difficult situation to be able to create redress in a proper court of law. And so an accusation is a charge against an offender made by a private person or an informer to a justice of the peace or another proper officer, alleging that the offender has violated law and claiming that the penalty due to the prosecutor. Now, this differs from the information that you're required to have, okay? You're supposed to have some form of information for an indictment, okay? So how does this happen? Well, if they're not going ahead and giving you the proper warrant when they pull you over, okay? Because again, there's only three reasons why any enforcement officer, let it be a sheriff, state patrol, local policeman, or policewoman, what have you, pulls you over. The first aspect is number one, that they see you commit a felony. Okay. Number two, there's a riot and they're asking you, the living man or woman, to assist them in putting down the riot. And number three, they actually have a signed, embossed with a seal, not a stamp, okay, like you see, on a warrant. Okay, those are the only three reasons why they should ever pull you over. Now, what if you're rolling through a stop sign and there's nobody coming in either direction? Okay, and you just kind of look both ways and there's cars, it's just empty road. And you roll through and you get pulled over. Did you violate the law? No, because again, there is no injured party in that aspect. There's no endangerment, okay? There's no presumption. Now, when we look at the presumption aspects, we have to go back to Title IV, Section 112 of the U.S. Code. And that states basically that any of your properties presumed to have committed a crime, and you have to prove that you're innocent. So it violates our constitutional aspect of due process. So that's what we have to look at from that standpoint. Now, when we look at the aspect of bringing our court case, if we have one, to a true court of law, okay? A true court of law has to be a title Article 3 court. It has to be an Article 3 court for true judicial process. Today we have what is referred to as judiciary. That's administrative, okay? And so when we look at the administrative aspects, we have to look back at what we started with, the burden of showing abuse of discretion, okay? Because if you're bringing in affidavits and declarations and they're not being rebutted with any evidence, then the court is actually violating and showing an abuse of discretion. And so we have to be able to push forward the burden of proof that the court itself is violating its own proper aspects, even under administrative law. And since the Chevron case was overturned here, the administrative courts no longer have the ability to utilize discretion of agencies to determine what the law means. In other words, they would get somebody who has never been appointed by anybody, has no knowledge of law, and they're telling the judge or the prosecutor how to determine what the law is. And so this has been overturned, which is one of the biggest cases in the history of our government. And so as we continue to move forward within the aspect of a republic form of government, we have to be able to understand that we have to convey not only who we are, but we also have to be able to convey whatever property that we have, let it be personal, which is anything other than real land, okay, or your home, so to speak, on real land. And then you have real property, and that is of the land and of your home. And so conveyance, the act of transmitting or transferring as titles estates or claims from one person to another. Okay. Now, we all understand the definition of person. That's a commercial structure, just so you know. Okay. Back in the day, it was even known that the terminology was in the commercial structure of government. Okay. And again, if you go back through and we look at some of our chat sessions and things of this nature, you'll be able to go ahead and look at some of the aspects of where we're at, what we're doing, how we convey through an instrument of moving commercial property back into a private status. Okay. And we do all that through trust. And so we have to take into consideration as we're moving our properties around, what is the structure of corporate? What is actually corporate? Okay. What does that mean? Because when you talk to people around your community and you say, hey, your property is governed under commercial law, they'd probably look at you and think you're nuts. They think you're one of these conspiracy theorists. Okay. And so corporate, it's united in a body or community. United in a body or community. I'm going to stop right there. United in a body or community. What is a citizen? Well, a citizen is united within a community of the commercial structure of government. Okay? Now, who are empowered to transact business as an individual formed into a body. So, who are empowered to transact business as an individual formed into a body, a corporate body. Okay? And so when we look at it from a state of government, government's corporate body is quasi in rem. And those are the areas that we have to take into consideration of what is actually true municipal, which works in constitutional and incorporated structure, versus the full commercial structure of government that we have today. And again, it all started back, early in 1871 and even prior to that, because again, they had to take time. They just didn't one day in 1871 say, hey, we're going to, turn the United States into a corporation. And so as early as the late 1780s, through the judiciary process, turning over from judicial to forward to 1871, that's the time frame that everything in our government started to change in structure into that commercial status. And that's where we have to have the ability to recognize what's transpired. And so a corporation, a body politic or corporate formed by and authorized by law to act as a single person in society, having the capacity of transacting business as an individual. Okay. A person, an individual, let it be government or not, is considered a corporation. So one of the main areas that we're working toward is to change the structure of who you are. Okay. Are you the all cap name? Okay. Or are you the municipality aspect or the sovereign? Okay. These are the areas that we have to take into consideration when we look at a corporation as an entity that's been converted from the living man or woman, son or daughter. Now, if you're in any type of legal situation dealing with kids, your sons and daughters in a court, let it be CPS and things of this nature, those are all administrative courts. They have no rights to determine the best or financial situation for your son or daughter. Okay. It's all through the presumption that you're a corporation, an individual. A corporation solely consists of one person only and his successors, no different than a king or a bishop. Okay. So again, think about what I'm saying, a king or a bishop. Okay. So we have a king who oversees land. The people are the servants to that king, and we look at it from the aspect of a bishop, you are a servant to that religious aspect instead of them being a servant to you and vice versa. Okay. As a national, we change the aspect and we derive from a whole different principle. So what does derive mean? To draw from in a regular course or channel, to receive from a source by a regular conveyance. Okay. To turn from its natural course, to divert. So that's what's transpired with government. They have turned us away from our natural course that God created us in his image. Okay. They've converted us into this entity that they created, expecting the living man and woman, son and daughter, to adhere through force, through color of law, to obey. In other words, you don't have the ability to use your own discernment that was given to you. So as we move forward and we look at it from the aspect of domicile, okay? And domicile is one of the very first things that we did in this movement that we were educated with in the constitutional principles of our country. Domicile, okay? There's three areas of domicile that you're in. You have the ability to be domiciled by law, and that's the presumption that you're a commercial entity, okay? So let's say any of you out there who own a home and you filed your Homestead Act, 99% of the time in every county throughout our country, they're going to send you a piece of paper to fill out your information so you can ask for the Homestead Act. When they do that, they normally will send out a piece of paper of domicile. And when they send that piece of paper out to you and you fill it out, you don't realize and you don't recognize the all cap structure of the county and the state that's on this paper. And so when you sign it and you take it into the notary and they notarize your signature, you've adhered to this contract of the commercial structure of the Homestead Act, which is a violation of your rights of due process to own property free and clear. So, what other types of domicile besides domicile of law that we have? Well, we have domicile of birth. So wherever you were born at, okay, doesn't matter what state, what country, your domicile of birth will never, ever change. It stays with you throughout your life, okay? And so, for instance, myself, I was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So my domicile of birth will always be Cheyenne, Wyoming. Okay. Now, some of you might be Greenville, some of you might be, in Tennessee, whoever. Okay. But that will always remain your domicile of birth, which is very important because when we look at the domicile of birth, that's when the structure of government is creating your all cap name. You have a document that the government has produced that is your all cap name, birth certificate, commercial structure. And then you have your life birth certificate. And in my generations, the majority of time, all the states had your name in upper and lowercase the way it was meant to be. Since that time, many states have converted away from that aspect because, again, they want to control the commercial name that you're created by government, and they only give you a all cap birth certificate. Now, Alaska doesn't allow you to have your original live birth certificate. They're the only state in the union that doesn't do that, okay? Now, the main part of domicile, we've given you two of them, domicile of law and domicile of birth. The most important one is domicile of choice. And domicile of choice is when you, the living man or woman, son or daughter, okay, get to determine on your own where you live. And so, like in our situation here, when we moved here to South Carolina after leaving Florida and doing our teachings in Florida for 5 years, we came here and we put our property in a trust. Okay. And so when we purchased our home, it was in a trust, in a private trust. Now, through the paperwork that we received through the county, they wanted to have us give out our registration of our cars, our driver's license, the trust paperwork. They wanted to see all this stuff. So that way they could continue to place you into that commercial structure. See, there are two different types. Well, there's many different types, but the main ones that we're going to be talking about today to this evening is public and private. Okay. The majority of trusts and wills are in the public sector, just so y'all know. And if any of you happen to go through probate again, it's because it's in the public sector. Okay. When you do a private type trust, it's not in the public sector, and you're not able to share that with the public sector because once you do, it becomes public. So you have to be able to understand that the communication that you share with the government entities has to remain in the private. So you have to protect yourself. Most trusts have what is called an affidavit of trust, which is normally anywhere from a 1 to 5 page aspect of information of who's in control of the trust as far as trustees, who the beneficiaries are, what options you have as a trustee to be able to do things, okay, like buy property, sell property, open bank accounts, things of this nature, okay? So the domicile of choice, when they asked us for this information, we had to go ahead and include this on our third letter, because again, everything's done in threes, back to the county with our domicile of choice. And our domicile of choice places us on the land of the United States of America, for America, okay? And by doing so, that moves us outside of the commercial structure of presumption that we are on the water as a corporation, maritime and admiralty, as well as administrative and commercial law of the judiciary court system in our county and throughout the state, as well as throughout the 3,000 plus counties in our country. Okay. So those are the three that we talk about that are very important to have. And we have this paperwork and we'll utilize this paperwork to be able to share with people and be able to help people as they're moving through this process of reclaiming their actual birthright of a republic form of government that we are guaranteed through our constitutional principles of our country, which our country was founded upon. So again, domicile of law, government's presumptions, domicile of birth, wherever you're born never changes, domicile of choice, you are in control of everything. Okay? So, as we continue, we're going to go ahead and talk about establishing your domicile. Okay? Because until it's written down and until it's made available to those individuals who need to know where you're domiciled at, okay? Because again, your domicile of choice can be public. It's not a big deal. Okay. I just want you to know that. Okay. It doesn't affect your trust. It doesn't affect anything. It's basically an affidavit declaration that you are no longer part of the commercial structure quasi in rem government. Okay. So you're establishing, you're fixed, okay, where you're at, you're standing on the land firmly, okay, and you've enacted as well as ordained. Okay, so think of what I'm saying, ordained. Why would we use the term ordained? Okay, because you're bringing in your aspect of your religious beliefs. Okay, were you created by government or were you created in God's image? Now, there might be some atheists out there who believe they were created by government. Okay, I'm just saying. Might be a liberal, but I don't think you'd be on this Zoom call if you were. Now, if we're created by God in God's image, it's a religious belief. We have that ability through our First Amendment within our religious rights. Okay. When we look at the term creed in our Declaration of Independence and some of these other areas that we hear about creed, you don't see it in the constitutions of the states. And the reason why is creed is a belief. Okay. The government wants to control your belief. And that's something that we have to take into consideration as we move forward, because again, belief is of man, ego, okay? Knowing is of spirit and light, religious, so to speak. Which energy are you going to be utilizing as you move forward into the spiritual warfare that we are moving out of? Because as government attacks us, it's through our spirituality that we are created in God's image. Okay. Now, an estate. Your trust is basically creating not just control over property, but it's also creating an estate as well. And so when you're working within that, it's a fixed condition, your estate. You're controlling it, you're fixing it. Okay. You don't want the government to come into your estate and try to fix it or tell you, okay, well, you went ahead and you put this will together or this living will, or maybe you didn't have one, and so we're going to go through probate, and we don't care what the will says or who's in it. We're going to go ahead and just override everything, and we're going to determine who gets what. And if we determine the government gets some of your property, then so be it. Okay. These are the things that we fear as living men and women without this knowledge that we're sharing. So we want to be able to take the condition or circumstances away from that fear through establishing our trusts. Okay. Now, when we look at it from another standpoint, we want to be able to express what we're doing in a manner of knowledge, the knowing. Okay. And so we want to be able to represent in writing using words and language that are defined properly, and to convey our property, let it be real or personal, in a well-expressed manner. In other words, we want to make sure that there's no way to break into that expression of where you want your property to go. Because the courts are looking for that every day. They're looking to do whatever they can, because again, anytime you're in court, there's bonds created. You have a performance bond, you have a bid bond, you have all these aspects of bonds that are being created where the government makes money off of your own trust through the credit debit system established through the fiat currency of the Federal Reserve. Okay. So when we look at it, we want to be able to express and we want to act on our expression without any pressure. Okay. In other words, we can't have the government forcing us to express certain things. We have to be able to express what we know, not what we believe, that this property that I have equity in, okay, is mine, is this trust. Okay, so when you look at it from the standpoint of is mine, it's the beneficiaries of the trust. Okay, so the trust owns everything. We become stewards once again. Now, as American Indian, okay, and some of you might have heard this and some of you might not have heard this, the biggest problem that American Indians have, okay, especially living on the reservation, is they feel through expression that they are sovereign. And there's not one sovereign aspect of of a reservation, okay? The American Indian was the very first socialist program brought forth in our country. Where to live, what we could eat, if we could hunt. They took away our guns. You know, we had to go basically do anything and everything that the government said. Okay, so that was like the very first socialist experiment in our country. When you start looking at the American Indians, you know, throughout our area here of North America. When we look at the aspect of declaring and representing who we are as living men and women, sons and daughters, we have to do it in a very sentiment. We have to be able to say it in a manner of subject matter. This piece of property will go to this heir. Okay. This personal property, this diamond ring will go to my granddaughter. We have to be able to state exactly where we want to do this. Now, in the trust that we help people initiate, there's an area there called Schedule A. And in that Schedule A is where you put the property and you write where you want that property to go. And you want to be able to write it in the aspect of bringing it in where there's no possibility of saying, well, you know, I have a granddaughter named Leslie and I have another granddaughter named Leslie. Okay. So when you put this paperwork together, which Leslie is actually the one getting the property. You follow me? So you want to include birth date, things of this nature. You want to be very precise. Okay. So as we move into the area of absolute, okay, or fee simple, one would say, is land which a man holds to himself and his heirs forever. Think what I'm saying. Absolute fee or fee simple. Okay. In society today, most people don't look at it from the aspect of legacy. When we are working in the area of truth and we're working in the area of knowledge, we're bringing a legacy through this trust that we are initiating. Okay. Your legacy is what you have acquired in your lifetime that allows you to give it to an heir. Okay. So when we look at it again, an absolute fee or fee simple is land which a man or woman holds to himself or herself and is heirs forever. And that's what we're creating. So in other words, the government can't come in and say, hey, you know, we're going to do what we want and we don't care what you feel because you haven't written it properly. Okay. Now, in some constitutions, you're going to hear the aspect of feigned. In the state of Idaho, within their constitution, it talks about no feigned issues being brought forth to the courts. Okay. Feigned. In other words, no imagined or assumed injuries can be brought forth to the courts under the Constitution of the state of Idaho. Now, some states have that aspect within their constitution and many don't. Because again, they want to be able to utilize the judiciary to create and generate revenue through the credit debit system, again, where the court registry investment system, which is the monies allocated out of these court cases through bonds that go back into this system, the court registry investment system, that is dispersed through the judges and through the clerks, and in some cases, the prosecutors and attorneys, if they are actually doing the paperwork into the Treasury. Okay, so we want to make sure that the government can't go ahead and falsely represent or pretend that there's some fictitious situation that they have authority over, okay? Because they're creating the fictitious area, okay? They are inventing and imagining through their own conception or idea that they have the authority over you, the living man or woman, son or daughter, okay? Now, as we move forward, we want to take a look at the area of against, okay? When you come into this situation of truth, and we come into this aspect of knowing, and we're bringing forth the conclusions of our knowledge that we've gained through the time we've spent studying versus just, entitlement, wanting everybody to give us this. Because again, it's your journey, okay? We're not here to convince or pride you or bug you or any of that knowledge, okay? It's up to you to make the steps forward, okay? And so, like some of you who have initiated this in the very beginning, I've said, get your birth certificates, get them done, get them authenticated in the state, in your county, if that's what you choose to do as well, and in the United States. Secretary of State. Get them all authenticated so that way you can come back with the full faith and credit paperwork attached to your birth certificate. Now, maybe some of you have done it and some of you haven't done it yet. Okay. It's not my duty to, hey, have you done this? Okay. When you do it, you do it. Okay. I'm not here to convince you. If you do it and you get it back and you want to know the next step, then I'm going to help you. But until you get that back, I can't just go ahead and write out a bunch of steps and say, hey, this is how you do everything. Because again, that's not how I operate. Now, some people will operate that way, and that's fine. But the reason I don't operate that way is because this is some heavy stuff. And if I just threw out all this stuff, what you got to do, you're going to look at it and you're going to go, man, I don't want to do this. This is a bunch of BS. This is a lot of work. Okay. But in reality, it's only about 6 months of your life, paperwork, mailing things in, receiving things back, mailing things in again. I mean, what do you have that's more important than taking care of your legacy so you can create a well monitored trust that has the ability to continue for 100 years? Okay. I mean, most people never think about a trust. I always think about wills because, again, wills can be broken into by the government. When you go to an attorney, the attorney's going to put your will together and he's going to put your name in all capital letters. There's not a will out there, okay, that I've seen that an attorney has put together that doesn't have your name in all capital letters. Not one. Now, if you have one, I'd like to see that because I'd like to talk to that attorney because there's none that I have met that do that. Because again, according to their rules and regulations, their first duty is to the court and to the bar, okay? Not to you, their client. So, one of the areas that we have to continue on and look at is free. We're not talking freedom yet. We're just talking free, okay? Being at liberty, not being under necessity or restraint, physical or moral. A word of general application to the body, the will or mind, and to corporations. Okay? Now, let me read that one more time. Being at liberty. Okay, what is liberty? Liberty is a commercial term of maritime. When you're on a ship, back in the old days, you were given liberty to come aboard the land. Okay? Why do you think we have the Statue of Liberty? It's given you permission to come into the United States incorporation. Okay? I'm not fond about the term liberty. Okay? I understand standing under. Okay? I'm accepting that many people look at liberty as a positive statement. I find it very hard to look at it as a positive statement if I'm asking permission or I'm given permission to have liberty. Okay? Just take that into consideration. Now, in government, it means not enslaved, not in a state of dependence, subject only to fixed laws. Wait a minute here. If I'm not enslaved, but I'm subject to fixed laws, does that mean I'm free? Think of what I'm saying. Okay? Subject only to fixed laws made by consent. Think of what I'm saying here. Made by consent. Consent equals what? A contract in equity. I want to say that again. Consent means a contract in equity. In other words, you're giving away your unalienable rights that God bestowed upon each and every one of you because you're consenting to a structure of fixed laws, color of law, laws of the citizen, laws of the United States Incorporated, 1871. Okay. Now, when we look at freeborn, okay, born free, when you're freeborn, you're inheriting liberty. Okay. Many of you might not have heard this term, freeborn. It means you inherit liberty. In other words, it's forced upon you. It's given to you. Boom, you're automatically presumed to ask permission to come aboard land. Okay. Now let's look at freehold. The land or tenement which is held in fee simple, fetal, or for term of life. It is of two kinds, in deed and in law. The first is the real possession of such land or tenement. The last is the right of man has to such land or tenement before his entry or seizure. Okay? What does that actually mean? Remember when we talked about fee simple? Okay? That's you protecting your property. So when you are a freeholder, you're one who owns an estate in fee simple or fee tel or for life. The possessor of a freehold. Okay? That's who you become once you take control of your estate through your trust and you're creating the estate. Now, a free man. Okay? Now, this is another area that kind of throws you off into a little curve here as well. free man, one who enjoys liberty or who is not subject to the will of another, one not a slave or a vessel, one who enjoys or is entitled to a franchise. Wait a minute here. I'm entitled to a franchise. What's the franchise? You're a citizen. It's a corporation. Think about that then, okay? Every living man and woman who is a citizen is basically what is entitled to a free man or a free woman. You enjoy and you're entitled to a franchise. Now, when they made you a citizen, did they say, hey, by the way, we're going to give you liberty? Okay. In other words, you got to have permission because our laws and things of this nature that we're creating under color of law all require permission. Did they bring forth any disclosure to your parents when you were born? Saying, hey, we're going to take the placenta and we're going to create this entity through the corporation structure of our government. And now you're created by government because we have your DNA and placenta registered as a corporation. Okay. When we look at the sovereign movement and we look at Montana, that was the term the government gave the sovereign people of Montana who were working to break out of the citizenship control. The freeman of Montana, okay, freeman. They were basically ahead of the game when it come to accessing the trust, your Ceste QV trust. They were ahead of the game in many areas that were difficult to break through because at that time we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the ability to come here live like we are right now and share information. Okay. So when we look at it from the aspect of why they were tagged that way is because, again, they were breaking away from that entitled franchise of the citizenship. So again, what does government do? Oh, you're a sovereign citizen. Terminology, sovereign, citizenship, opposite, can't exist. Definition, opposite, can't exist. So we have to be able to take that into consideration of where we're moving to. And so as we move forward and we kind of come down to the end of this talk this evening, injury. What's an injury? Okay. Because when you're in court and there is no injury to a living man or woman, it's all about the revenue generated. In a republic form of government, there has to be an injured party. You have to have the ability to cross-examine the injured party. You have to have the understanding of who was injured, what the claim is, and have the ability to cross-examine that individual. Okay? Injury. In general, any wrong or damage done to a man's person, okay, again, remember person, corporation, rights, reputation, or goods, that which impairs the soundness of the body or health, or gives pain as an injury. That which impairs the mental facilities is an injury. In other words, when you have mental stress because something took place, caused you harm, okay? Mental anguish, okay? These injuries may be received by a fall or by other forms of violence. They could be through trespass, fraud, a non-fulfillment of covenants, or contracts. These all are injuries to right, okay? Contracts. Somebody broke a contract, you're injured, okay? Let's say I'm going to bring you 60 cord of wood for $50. And all of a sudden I bring you 20 and I say, hey, I ain't paying you anything. I ain't taking anything more. Well, you can come after me because I've injured you. We had a contract. I was going to supply. I didn't do my due diligence and duty to give you that. You've been harmed. That's an injury. Okay. Going down the road, you get hit in a car crash. Boom. You get your head shook. Hits the side of the window. You go in, you have a concussion. That's an injury. Okay. Why do you think there's so many attorneys that do injury claims? It's all about the money because they can prove an injury. And sometimes attorneys actually have doctors that, there is no injury, just saying. And they say there is one because it's all about the money, the insurance, high insurance rates across our nation. Okay. That's where injury becomes an injustice. Inequity, wrong, any violation of another's rights through fraud within contracts. It's unequal distribution. It's an injustice. Okay. So when we look at it from the standpoint of where we are today, what trusts, what area of laws, who we are as men and women, sons and daughters, it all goes back to the aspect of how do we protect this legal presumption that we're no longer a commercial status created by government. And that's where we assist through our own personal experience, as well as others, okay? Because I'm not the only one teaching this. I mean, when I first started back in the late 70s, there was very few of us. Now there's millions of people talking about what we've been teaching over the years. Some have taken it further than I've even gone, okay? Because again, that's what they do. I bring you into the aspect of the basics, get everything situated for you. And if you want to continue on, we can continue on. And we can put you to those individuals who take it further, okay? Some of you might want to go all the way. Some of you might just want to control your assets. Just depends on what you want to do. So, again, it's 8:37. We started at 7:30. Anything more, we'll just kind of go in one ear and out the other. So I'm going to go ahead and call it an evening. And I'm going to go ahead and do a quick synopsis here this evening. And just to make sure that all of you have the ability to come and look at our previous classes, I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat the 3 links again to our first class dealing with Introduction to Corporate Governance, our second class dealing with laws and trusts, and our third class dealing with the same aspect, but a little bit further with the indentation of UCC from the class 2 to the class 3 and the breakdown of everything. So these are you're not going to find them on YouTube, okay? Because this is like a private area of YouTube, okay? You type in the, Ninth Amendment Party, you're not going to find it, okay? You're not going to find Balanced Toe, type that in, you're not going to find it on my own personal. These are private, okay? They're not out there in the public. And the reason why is because as soon as they get out there in the public, for some reason, doesn't matter if it's Rumble or YouTube or whoever, all of a sudden they get knocked out, or I get it banned by, certain things because, people don't want this information being shared, especially my information. I mean, I've been banned from almost every aspect of social media. And so it's just, it is what it is, and I'm okay with it because I continue. We just have to realize that we are made in God's image and that we will move forward in a spiritual realm doing this spiritual war as our country returns back to a republic form of government. So click on your chat, take your phone out, and if you're using the phone, go ahead and hit us on our new aspect that we're using for our chats and our talks. And it's on our phone in some cases, and some of you might have it on your computers. But again, it's on our Signal, okay? State nationals, okay? That's our latest, And so again, if you're not on our area here of our state national here on our new aspect of Signal, so we can communicate much easier because our people are growing and they're sharing this information and more people want to know more and things of this nature, So I challenge each and every one of you, find somebody, bring them aboard. Say, hey, you ain't got nothing to lose, got everything to gain. Do you want the government to control you, or do you want to be able to control yourself? That's what it boils down to. Okay. So again, people, I appreciate your time. I hope everyone has a good night. You have any questions, write them down. Put them in our chat forum on Signal. Okay. And we'll go ahead and get them answered. Okay. Now, each of you that are on there that have personal questions, okay, personal stuff, stuff you don't want to share with other people. On Signal, you can direct message me, okay, and I'll answer you back, direct message you back. Because again, your private situation is your private situation. And when we look at everything, we want to have the ability to keep it private for you. We want to be able to respect each and every one of you, privacy, okay? So I'll go ahead and I'll probably save this video and I'll add it to my YouTube section so you can all come back and listen to this one again. Okay. We don't go into a lot of the questions and answers and things of that nature on public forums. Okay. Because again, that's private stuff. Each of you are different. So again, I'm going to look at one more time on our chat, make sure everybody's got it. We appreciate your time, your persistence, and may God bless each and every one of you. God bless America. Good night.